Kara, can you get the lights? Can you get the lights? Other way. Is that the setting we want? What you had it before? The lights for presentation. You can switch into that, yeah, thanks. Okay, welcome back everybody. This is our second paper of the session. For anybody that's new here, please go ahead and silence your cell phones right now. And as another reminder for folks that are new, this session is being recorded in its entirety. Our second paper is Gender Equity in an Evolving Work Environment. Our presenters are Jeff Coulter and Mrs. Nina Deibler. Mr. Coulter is an instructional designer at Serco. He has over 20 years of experience designing and developing learning and assessments, training adults, aligning curriculum, and delivering instruction within the corporate and consulting industries. He is actively involved in diversity and inclusion issues inside and outside of Serco. Jeff is a contributing member of Serco Embrace, Serco Women, In at Serco, Diversity, Inclusion, and Serco, I'm not sure how much time he has for all of these things, but this seems like a lot. A certified human rights consultant and U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights. Mrs. Deibler is a technical consultant at Serco. She has over 20 years experience designing and developing learning and performance support solutions for clients in academia, industry, and government, and she is currently serving on the ITSEC Simulation Subcommittee. So please, let's welcome Mr. Coulter and Mrs. Deibler.
Good morning. As Brian said, my name is Jeff Coulter. I have time for all of those things because I have this really great boss who lets me work on them. I'm starting off our presentation this morning for two very important reasons. First, I strongly believe that resolving issues of gender equity in the workplace is men's work. Women did not create these disparities. It's unfair to expect them to resolve them. The second reason is that across the studies that we looked at, one of the things we found is that when a male ally talks about sexism, men pay more attention. The ally is less likely to experience social costs such as derogatory remarks, and is generally more persuasive in convincing other men that workplace sexism exists and is unacceptable. Men are taken more seriously because confronting sexism doesn't benefit them directly. Alternatively, when women address sexism, they're seen as either acting out or acting in self-interest. So what's in it for all of us? If you are a woman in the workplace, this impacts you. If you are a man in the workplace, this impacts you. We are one workforce. We also recognize that this can be a sensitive topic. In the 50 years since pay equality was passed, we haven't seen a whole lot of progress. One of the surprising reasons for that is that 17% of women and 39% of men don't believe that there is a gender wage gap. Now, these numbers can be a little misleading because when you get into conversations with these people, very often what comes up is that they're not arguing that the gap doesn't exist. They either don't feel that it's significant or they justify the reasons that the gap exists to begin with. Today we'll be talking about gender equity statistics. We're also going to address equity in a pandemic since that's a big deal right now. We'll talk about wage equity, opportunity equity. We have recommendations at several levels, and then we'll summarize. 51.1% of the US population is made up of women. 48% of the US workforce is made up of women. 43% of the federal workforce is made up of women. And 35% of the workforce is in the DoD is made up of women. Now, when you look at the difference between 48% and 51.1%, it may not seem that significant. Keep in mind that each percentage point represents approximately 700,000 women, and 3.1 percentage points represents 2.18 million women in the United States. While state and federal legislatures have passed some laws that influence gender equity, the past decade has not shown significant changes for inequity in the workplace. The Global Gender Gap Report 2020 calculated that based on the rate of change in the past 20 years, corporations won't approach true gender equity until approximately 2120. Now, those numbers have been slowed down by the pandemic. I'd like to ask, how many of you have daughters who may be entering the workforce in the next decade? Quite a lot of you. Those daughters are going to face challenges that many women today don't. Because of the pandemic, women have been dropping out of the workforce or out of specific industries at unprecedented rates, which means that our daughters, when they enter the workplace, may not find the North Star, that woman whose career is both inspirational and achievable. So if we look out that decade or even further out, how gender diverse will our boards, our C-suites, and our leadership pipelines be if up-and-coming women can't find a North Star? Because she simply is not there. On a global level, 39% of the global workforce is women. However, 54% of jobs lost due to the pandemic were women. Part of the reason for this is that women are overly represented in the service industry, which was hit particularly hard. All of us have had to make adjustments and sacrifices during the last 18 months. For some, working at home was great. For others, it wasn't. How many of you had to make very specific decisions and very difficult decisions about how to balance home life and work life during the last 18 months? How many of those decisions were based on childcare? How many of those were based on having to homeschool? Due to the challenges of this pandemic, 4 times as many women as men dropped out of the labor force due to lack of childcare. In talking about the wage gap of 2021, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, for every dollar that a man earns, on average, a woman earns 81 cents. That number drops to 75 cents for women of color. And over the course of a lifetime, a woman will earn 67 cents for every dollar that a man earns. According to the same report, the median weekly earnings of full-time workers were $989 in the first quarter of the year. Women had median weekly earnings of $900, 82.6% of the 1,089 median for men. Among the major occupational groups, persons employed full-time in management, professional, and related occupations had the highest median weekly earnings, $1,615 for men and $1,179 for women. Men and women employed in service occupations earned the least, $741 and $582. This problem isn't new. And part of the problem is that there are unstated expectations that we have of women in today's society. We expect women to work as if they don't have children and to raise children as if they don't have a job. And that puts them in an impossible situation. Reports show that senior level women are nearly twice as likely as women overall to be the only woman or one of just a few women in the room at work. As we started this report, Nina and I did a small survey with approximately 100 participants in our industry, and this was one of the more telling comments. I think they're trying to be inclusive on the surface. The fact that all senior leaders of my organization are male, except for the single HR female, says something different. I'm going to turn it over to Nina.
Thanks, Jeff. For many women, parenting presents one of the biggest social and professional challenges that we face. We get comments like, you're not going to keep working after you have the baby, right? Or you're going to let someone else raise your child? For a woman, comments like this imply that motherhood is more important than our career. But on the flip side, oftentimes women at work hear things like, you don't really need all that time off, do you? Or, this won't impact you at work. You're not gonna have to leave work to go to appointments or something, will you? Those comments from companies imply that your career is more important than your family. About 1 in 5 working parents say they've turned down a promotion in order to balance their work life and their family life. Another study says that 17% of parents have been passed over for an important assignment or promotion simply because they had children. Now, mothers are more likely than fathers to report this, but fathers are reporting this as well. So this isn't just about women, this is about parents. Only 7 of the top 100 federal contractors ranked by Washington Technology 2020 were rated as best companies by Working Women magazine. These are those companies. Is anyone here from any of these companies? Show of hands, great, awesome. So these companies are the top federal employers for working women. They have set the gold standard for what companies need to do for not only working women, but working parents, because this really is a family issue. Now on that list of the top 100, the top 5 contractors on that list offered less paid maternity leave than all of their counterparts. So this is the gold standard. When we looked at what all these companies were offering to parents, these were the things that they really had in common. Each company had slight differences in what they offered, but overall there was a general trend of somewhere between 8 and 12 weeks of paid leave for birth mothers, and many offered as much as 4 to 16 weeks of gender-neutral leave. That allows fathers and adoptive parents the time that they need to bond with their new family. So pulling, from the spectrum, this is really what it looks like to meet a gold standard in supporting parents in the workforce. So my question is, how many of your companies are at that gold standard? Maybe you're a smaller company that didn't make the top 100 list. Anyone else there? Okay, so we have one person. My own company is not there yet. It is not easy. It is not inexpensive. This costs a lot in terms of, paid time off and those types of things. But what does it mean for the workforce? It's quite significant, actually. Jeff and I came together on this issue 10 years ago when my son was born. When my daughter was born via C-section, I got 8 weeks of leave, 6 weeks of short-term disability, which is only paid at 66%, so it's not full paid leave. So I thought when I went to a different company that I would get the 8 weeks that I got for a C-section, and I called HR and she said, no, it's 6 weeks. You're just having abdominal surgery. And the focus there was on just, right? So if a man goes and has abdominal surgery, the man's healing and taking care of himself and recovering, while a woman is recovering from just abdominal surgery that happens to be a cesarean section, she is also caring and nurturing for a tiny human, right? So it is expensive, it's time consuming, but the impact that has emotionally on women is quite taxing in the workforce. And we need to really think about that. So that's where Jeff and I came together on this, because when I hung up with HR, I called Jeff and I said, you're not gonna believe this. So this has been something that's been a common interest of ours for many years. So what can we do about it? These are some recommendations we have for ITSEC. So here at the conference, some things that we can do. And we've broken this into 3 parts. Things that we can do through ITSEC. Things that industry needs to do and really look at. So by industry here, I'm talking about your companies, our employers in the private sector. And then we've got some policy recommendations. So at a federal level, what kinds of things need to happen? One of the things that ITSEC does the best is our STEM programming. Women represent 28% of the STEM workforce right now. That needs to change if we're going to have any level of equity and our daughters are going to have opportunities for the careers that are the highest paying and most cutting edge, right? So, doing things like ensuring there's equal representation in the Future Leaders Pavilion. So if a school is participating, they're coming with equal numbers of boys and girls. So just creating more engagement around STEM programs would be fantastic. We also want to partner with NTSA in the coming year to look at this more in depth across the industry that ITSEC serves. So we'd like to do a survey of all of the women involved in ITSEC and disseminate that out to all NTSA members to find out how the conference, how NTSA can truly support them as a conference, but also throughout their careers, across the spectrum of their careers. And we recognize that not all women at ITSEC are engineers and technologists. There's business development people and human resources people, and many of us are instructional designers. So we want to look at, who's doing what and how can we better support all of them. A study conducted through Midwestern University found that in male-dominated industries, women are more successful when they have a senior male mentor. And the significance was pretty substantial for women compared to men. So women needed that senior male mentor significantly more than men in those fields did. So what can organizations do? First, we need to check our talent pipelines. We need to ensure that there are women in that pipeline going the whole way through, especially in fields that are typically more male-dominated, like engineering and technology. And we really need to look, as we closely examine that, at women of color. So, as Jeff said earlier, the wage gap is significantly greater between men and women of color than it is between men and women. And then we need to conduct a pay audit. With the pay audit, we need to look very closely at things like title, gender, age, education level, pay, tenure with the company. What are their evaluation scores? If we look at that quantitatively across time, then companies will have a much better understanding of, who's doing what and where those pay gaps are. And then finally, we need to look at our policies. The best way to know what women in the workforce need is to ask them. So companies need to say, what policies do we have right now that are holding you back? What is limiting your success? And where can we really go and figure that out and fix it? At a policy level, it's interesting that in the United Kingdom, companies have to provide an annual report to Parliament on wage gaps and gender equity. They have to report that. The US Congress should really look at doing something like that too. We don't have that right now. So that type of legislation would be fantastic to have a report that looks something like this. We also talk about FMLA, and we have pushed it to the private sector to do better than FMLA. Most people will say, oh, you're going to have a child, or you have an elder that you need to care for, just take FMLA. Sounds great, Family Medical Leave Act. But what most people don't know is the Family Medical Leave Act is 12 weeks of protection from your job, unpaid. The average working family cannot afford for a parent to take unpaid leave for up to 3 months. So we can't just count on that anymore as being acceptable. We know that when women are able to return to work after a paid leave, they are less stressed, more relaxed, and more successful at coming back to work. They return more quickly, and they are less likely to experience the discrepancies in pay that Jeff talked about over the course of a lifetime, right? We talked about 81 cents as the average discrepancy, but over the course of a career, a woman's income falls to 67 cents on the dollar. That is because of these gaps in time when a woman is having children. So creating gender-neutral policies for paid family leave also allows men to really engage in the caregiving prospect, which research has also shown allows women to focus more on their job when they know that at home they have an equal partner who is able to help care for the children. The issues faced by women in the workforce are not simple. They're quite complicated and very significant. And we have barely scratched the surface here. the paper goes into much more detail, but again, this is a huge issue. Tens of thousands of women are leaving the workforce to care for family members. In some cases, companies have been outstanding. My own management said, our CEO down said, do what you have to do, take care of, I loved this part, your pets, your children, and your elders. Get your work done when you can. If it takes you 24 hours to do the 8 hours of work, just meet our client deliverables and do what you have to do. I also know many women who did not have that support and who did leave the workforce. So we have a long way to go. I think we can get there, and hopefully in this forum we can begin to do that, because we really are one workforce, and coming together to try to solve this problem will really get us to where we need to be. Thank you, and we're happy to take any questions that you have. Yes.
Can you explain more, maybe expound on the male mentorship in a senior role? Maybe I misunderstood you, but you said that it was better for women to have a male senior leader role. Why is that? And why is it better than having, say, a woman senior leader or a person of color, if you are a person of color in a lower level?
Thank you for the question. The reason that we're finding that that works particularly well is for the same reason that if a male ally stands up and says that we need to confront sexism, he gets more attention than if a female says it. So by selecting key male mentors throughout the company, that not only partners a woman with someone who can give her strong mentorship, but he then becomes her ally. So in those boardrooms and those executive meetings where there may only be one woman to talk about the needs for women, we now have a male ally who can do the same. So that's where the benefit actually is for both of them.
Any other questions?
So you talked about working with the conference and working with NDIA. Are you connected with Women in Defense?
We did not for this survey. So when we initially started this, we did a quick survey. We actually borrowed the survey tool, it's discussed in the paper, from NIST in a gender equity survey that they did at NIST. And we tried to adapt it slightly with their permission to work for this force. And basically we sent it out to everyone we knew. We sent it out to everyone we knew here, everyone we knew, at our companies, and said, please share this with your friends. I know there's people in this room that got that survey, male and female, and responded to it. What we found was that it wasn't, obviously the target sample was small. We got about 100 responses, which, considering how we sent it out sort of virally, that was great for us. But it really didn't hit at what we needed to know. So what we would like to do this year is go much bigger. And so yes, look at organizations like Women in Defense. Now that we really know what the issues are and where they are, we really want to hone in on in this industry, because we all know this is a largely male-dominated industry, much more than many others. So yes, we really want to look to other organizations, so NDIA, Women in Defense, NTSA, corporate human resources departments. So yeah, we're actually looking for allies to work on this. So we want to put together a comprehensive survey, and next year give you much more quantitative data about what we're finding.
So on your surveys, do you have questions about work being acknowledged as the same? I know as an engineer, I've on more than one occasion had my work was not engineering. My male counterpart, who was doing the exact same job, was an engineer. And so he got benefits for doing engineering work, and my work was not engineering, even though it was the same description and everything.
We did ask.
Do you ask those kind of questions?
The survey tool that we used from NIST asked exactly those kind of questions. My work is exactly the same as what my male counterparts are doing, but it has not been acknowledged, or and that was where the survey got kind of complex, because it didn't apply in all domains. NIST is a extremely technical domain, and then there's a few people that are more administrative and in nature, I guess. Versus like our industry, where we have a lot of people doing lots of different type of things. So that was like one of the problems we did have with it, but we covered that.
And it's difficult because one of the things we're trying to impress, and it's not listed as specific recommendation, is a process of take space, make space. If you're in a room with primarily men and you have 1 or 2 women in the room and someone asks a question, statistically it's probably going to be a male that answers it, not only because of the greater numbers, but because men tend to speak up before women. So for women, we recommend you take space. When the question's asked, step up. For men, we request that you make space. You may have the answer, but wait a second. Give someone else an opportunity, because men and women process information differently and will answer differently. Sir?
Yes, so I have a focus area in organizational development, leadership, and things of that nature. So I was curious, did the instrument account for a sense of the respondents, perhaps increased loyalty to an organization, or impact to retention with respect to more, I guess in my disciplines, sort of vernacular, emotionally intelligent policy?
Yes. Yeah, so the NIST survey tool that we used did. It talked about your company loyalty, how long you plan to be there. Obviously, those are, government positions largely, but it did ask all of those types of things. But in our research, we did find, and in the paper, we address the benefits to employers of being more parent-friendly. So we know retention is better when you're family-friendly. We know that work product is better. Productivity is better. The CEO of Serco actually stood up. He was doing monthly calls throughout COVID, and he was like, "You guys, I'm a believer. I can't believe I'm saying this." He's like, "This is working for us." He said, "We're being more productive than we ever have been, and I can't figure out what's going on." And we were like, people are happy. They're home, and they have flexibility. And even though I'm homeschooling my kid at the desk next to me, and he's like, "Hi, Jeff," in the background, the flexibility that we had made people able to work more. Obviously, there was some impact, right? We had less other obligations going on. There was no soccer practices and things like that. But yes, I mean, there is massive amounts of documented effort about being able to have work-life balance and the productivity benefits to employers.
Out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.